FMM crew, how the devil are you? So it's that time again, and this month's pro interview is with Roberto. Roberto is absolutely hammering it in the realms of techno. He regularly plays at clubs like Berghain and Tresor in Berlin, and until we unfortunately lost Fabric in London, he was also a regular playing there. So massive, massive clubs. And it's the same as a producer. He's currently produced over 400 tunes, so he knows what he's talking about. He's well worth listening to. And on top of that, he's a label owner and he's pushing forward his label Fossil Archive. And that's currently got releases from really big names on it. People like Jamie Anderson and Samuel Session, who I'm sure you've heard of. So Rob was really candid, went very, very in depth for us in this one. He's covered lots of stuff, why he thinks having a minimal setup in your studio is the way forward, how he pushed through early frustrations when he was producing using the cycle of success, how long it's taken him to develop his own signature sound, and of course that all important top tips for creating monstrous low end. So I'll shut my face and let you get stuck in. So hi Roberto, how is it going, man?
Hi Keith, I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, superb, buddy. Absolutely chuffed to have you on here. I've got tons and tons of questions from the community, but I want to kind of dig into where I always start with people, which is just to get an understanding of what got you into underground music in the first place and music production, and really what's been your journey.
Okay, well, when I was probably about sort of 13 at school, we went on a school trip on a long coach journey down from Leicestershire, where I grew up, to Devon. And on this long bush journey, a friend of mine had a Walkman with an old rave tape on it, and It was sort of like a jungle tape. It was Mickey Finn, and I'd never really heard anything like it. And as soon as I started listening to this tape, I was completely addicted. And from that sort of point, I really got into trying to dig for this kind of jungle sound. This would have been about 99, I reckon. And the tapes that he was playing were probably from the mid-90s. So when I found these record shops, what friends had recommended, that sold all this music, when I got there, all the music, all the sort of records that I was really into from the jungle times had gone. And it was all into like what became drum and bass.
Right.
But that sound didn't really capture me at first, because I was more into sort of breaky jungle stuff. But then I really got into drum and bass and started buying records and stuff. And when I was at school, I got it into my head that I wanted to go to college instead of doing A-levels, to study music technology and become a sound engineer. So that's what I did. I went off to college and started studying music technology, learning one of the early versions of Cubase VST it was still at the time.
Yeah.
And bits of hardware, and also like full recording studios where they would get bands in and stuff, because they actually had studios at the college as well. So that gave me a bit of a background into how to start producing. But I would come into college and play these like tapes of drum and bass sets and things like Fabio and Groove Rider from Radio 1, play them all this music. And the lecturers just had no idea really how they made these tunes, because it was so futuristic. The people that made these tracks were completely abusing all of the equipment to make it, and they were trying to teach it in quite a formal way. So eventually, through going out to drum and bass events in Leicester, I met some people who were making tracks at the time, and I got quite heavily involved in Formation Records, which was a label run by DJ SS at the time, and it's still going. And at the time, it was sort of Twisted Individual and some of these other really big producers, and they were selling a lot of records. And I kind of got in with that crew, and then just through hanging out with them, would pick up bits of how they actually made these tracks. So I actually learned, even though I had a bit of a background in it from college, I actually learned way more about actually producing drum and bass through these friends than I did at college.
Yeah.
Then I finished my college and went off to Salford University and studied acoustics, and I did that for 4 years, plus I did a year in industry. So actually now my day job is I'm an acoustic consultant for a small company, and I moved down to Hertfordshire to do that, nearer to London. When I made that move, I started going out in London and discovered techno. And that's when I kind of realised that all of the sounds that I liked in drum and bass came from primarily Detroit techno. And when I started listening to drum and bass again after I finished my degree, I didn't really like the direction it was going in, and really got into techno. And since that point, which was probably about 2008, I'd sort of been making and playing techno quite seriously. But I sort of learnt the basics in production when I was doing my drum and bass prior to that. It's only really when I started doing techno I sort of took it to a different level.
Right.
And it's just basically just perseverance, really, and endless hours in the studio to kind of discover a sound, because the technicalities of making a track, although it's not easy when you don't really know, once you sort of pick up the techniques, it is possible to do it, with some basic equipment. But I think the most difficult thing is to kind of come with your own sound that's original, because you tend to start copying other. I found anyway, you copy a lot of other stuff to begin with when you're learning, and then it's only really after a couple of years of just doing it when you start to develop your own sound. So that's kind of in a nutshell where I started and where I'm at now, really.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because I did want to ask you how long it took you to develop your, let's say, signature sound. Because I asked Chris Page the same, and he said he thought it was sort of a couple of years. So it's interesting the similarities, but you do very much have a signature sound. I mean, there is no doubt for me when I'm here listening to one of your tracks, I noticed, you've got a really strong groove to it. The way that you use the stabs and stuff is really interesting as well. And then there's the famous clap as well, which has been you've been running with kind of variations of that for quite a while, and it just sounds, that's a Roberto track. You just kind of know that. You? I mean, that is there a way that kind of evolved? Was there a light bulb moment where you sort of felt, hey, this is my own sound now?
Well, I think when I was doing my drum and bass, I found it really difficult to make drum and bass tracks, because really it's about creating a hook, a really catchy hook, and probably doing it with the bass line, and then it's built around this hook. Whereas techno is not really like that. It's more rhythm based, and instead of like these hooky drum and bass tracks which build and build to a crescendo, techno is more about building a groove over a longer period of time. There are periods of crescendo, but it's more about rhythm. And I actually found when I started making techno that, because I don't really have any formal musical background. I've tried to learn piano when I was younger, but I was pretty useless at it. So
yeah, same as.
music or anything like that. But that's one of the reasons why I struggled with drum and bass. But I found that I could do rhythm quite well when I started playing around with techno. And it just kind of evolved, really. There was never really a plan. It's just, taking influences from certain tracks and grooves and stuff, and then just kind of developing your own thing. I think the actual grooviness probably comes a bit from drum and bass, with all the sort of swung out, breaky drums that they would use, particularly in jungle. That's definitely an influence, but it's just kind of something that I developed over time naturally. I never really thought about it too much.
And how long were you spending in the studio back then? Were you writing every day, or?
Well, when when I was at uni, I did a placement year, and so I was working during the day, and then because I was single at the time, my routine would be to come home from work, put the computer on, and then just write music all evening after a bit of dinner. So, and I did that almost every night. And after a year, I really started to progress. Then I went back to uni, finished my degree, didn't do any music, and then came back, realised I didn't like drum and bass anymore because it had changed, and then got into techno. And then it was sort of similar. It was just most evenings, just doing a few hours, and just playing around. So yeah, I think if I was in the studio all day, every day, I'd probably struggle a bit. So I quite like just having limited time and being able to go in and just sort of lose yourself for a couple of hours and not overdo it. And that way you sort of don't drain too much of the creativity, I find.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, totally. It's because some people can sit for a long time. So I reference Chris again. He's capable of doing sort of a massive stint in one go. And I'm very similar to you. I just find that kind of shorter periods of time tend to work for me. So
I can't do the longer stints. It's just that I don't really have the opportunity to have that much time now.
Right.
With working and having a family and stuff, your time gets zapped. So it was kind of forced in that way, really. But it's just but it works for me. Like, I quite like it.
And back then, when you were writing your tracks, were you like seeing them all through to the end? Every time you started saying, were you trying to turn it into a finished track, even though it at the time wouldn't have been living up to sort of the expectations of where you wanted it to get to?
Well, it's funny you say that, because every track that I write, when I started doing techno, I numbered every track that I'd make. So I would open up Cubase and start something, and I made a sort of promise to myself that I would work on one track at a time, wouldn't have multiple projects going at once, and then everything I'd start, I'd finish. And that was the rule, and it didn't really matter how rubbish it was. I would try and make it as the best I could, but the rule was to always finish it. And I think that really helped me, because I learned so much about the process of finishing a track. Because you can come up with a cool idea, but if you leave it and you never really finish the tracks and arrange them and mix them, you're not learning that bit of the process. So that point when you actually come up with something that's really amazing, you might let yourself down by not arranging it to the best it could have been, or the mix might not be as good as it could have been. So I think that really helped me, actually.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's awesome, because the other thing is that when you get further into the process, you learn things about how you should have made it in the first place, if that makes sense. So you'll know for the next time that you're writing your loop and getting your idea, okay, I better look for gaps in the frequencies for the sounds, because when I got to the mix down, it was a mess. And actually it turned out, had I picked my sounds better in the first place, that could have worked. And so the further you get through the process, the more regularly you do it, the more you learn about interconnected bits, if that makes sense.
For sure. And you can, particularly at the early sort of, if you're just starting something and you're just trying to get a loop going, for example, and you put all the elements together and you start processing it before you even got near the arrangement or the final mix down, and you're doing all your tweaking and EQing and stuff, you can quite easily overcook it by way before you've even got anywhere near the proper mix down stage. And that's quite easy to do. And that's something I learned as well, was not to over process sounds too much at that initial early ideas stage. Yeah,
so it's just do enough to it to make it passable and workable for the track. Yeah, absolutely, and not get bogged down in like 2 hours on a compressor or something. Yeah,
and you can get bogged down in EQing a kick drum for 4 hours or something. It's just it's not really good for the creative process.
Yeah, absolutely. So you obviously were finishing all of these tracks, and actually you might be able to give me a really accurate answer here. At what number track did you decide to send it off to a label, for example? Oh. Roughly how long? I don't expect you to know, like it was number 32 or something like that, but...
Well, I've got my list here, actually. I'm just looking.
Oh, wow. This is unbelievably good.
Okay, so... To be completely honest with you, some of my early releases, I look back now and I'm just like, oh my God, why did I put these tracks out? And they were probably in the early 20s, I would say, 20s to 30s. And looking back, I really wished I'd just written more and waited. And I'm just looking now, it was probably until I started getting to about 100 where, up until that point, all the mixes and everything were fine. But it was when I really got to about 100 where my sound started to come through, really, I would say.
Right, so that's your signature sound. And how long was it taking you? I imagine it's sped up now, but how long was it taking you to finish a tune?
It varies, really. I tend to work quite quickly, because I get bored otherwise. So if I'm doing like 2 or 3 hour sessions every evening, I have done in the past, just started something and finished it completely within one session. Normally it takes me probably 3, maybe 4 sessions, but I've spent longer as well. It just depends on the track.
Right.
Sometimes you'll get something and you just pick a load of sounds and they all just work together and it just comes together so quickly and you're not bogged down too much in the nitty-gritty details. You're just going with it. And I think for me, they're probably the better tracks that I've written because you're just kind of going with the flow more.
Yeah, totally. So when you sent the stuff and got some releases in the early 20s, did you have people you were sharing your music with and getting feedback on it before you started sending it to labels?
Yeah, I had a couple of friends actually that would send stuff to. I think I would put stuff up on SoundCloud as well initially, and just see what people would think. And then through the friends that I was sending stuff to, I met other people who had just started their own labels, and then I found some other labels as well and contacted them, and it all just kind of happened naturally from there, really.
So it was a kind of stage by stage. There wasn't a moment where there was a kind of a specific track that blew up, or?
No, because for me, I don't think I've really had like big hits. It's just been putting stuff out, not oversaturating it, just doing it fairly regularly and just making sure everything's, the best it can be. But I don't think there was a track where I could say, right, well, this has really changed things now. Probably, maybe like when I did my EP on Factwork, that changed things a bit because I was able to DJ a bit more then. But yeah, it's quite difficult to kind of measure these things, really.
Yeah, because for example, I was talking to Ashley, Phase, and he I think it was Binary Opposition was a track that he wrote that kind of really went off the scale for him. Yeah. Everyone was playing it, and that sort of was a moment that it just took a big leap. But your progress has been kind of just this constant, consistent quality of releases, and because you've had some good people remix your tracks, and you've been remixing some tracks as well, haven't you? Like Jamie Anderson and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, I never really wanted to have a big hit, to be honest with you. It was, I'm quite happy just building it up slowly and just kind of growing organically, I guess. I think some of the artists that I look up to the most have done it that way. And I know, without sounding cliche, there's probably a risk to your career that if you just suddenly blow up, how do you sustain that over a long period? It's very easy to kind of come and go a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's not really something I'd want really. I'd sooner do it slowly and organically.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing bloody well. I mean, it's the way that it's talking. It's kind of like, oh, it's just plodding along, but it's not. I mean, you're playing amazing clubs. You're writing brilliant tracks. I mean, you obviously have been producing now. As I said, you're really consistent, very prolific with the amount of tracks. You've got like well over 100 out, isn't it? I think. I mean, certainly on Beatport, there's 3 or 4 pages, I think, of tunes.
Yeah.
What keeps you motivated to write? So why do you continue writing on a daily basis?
I think I'm just obsessed with it, to be honest. I just really enjoy being in the studio. I absolutely love DJing. I love them both. And I never thought I would really enjoy making music, because particularly at the start, I didn't really enjoy it. But I knew that if I could get into it, that would help me sort of DJ a bit more. But then I actually realised that I really, really love making music. So yeah, it's just that it's just a real passion of mine. It's something that I feel that I have to do. It's just my thing, really. And also, like, growing up, I don't have any siblings. I'm an only child, so when I was younger, I would spend quite long periods of time just by myself at home and not really thinking about, oh my God, I need to be around people or doing things. So, I'm quite happy to sit in the studio on my own and just sort of, it's almost like meditating for me. It's just like taking your mind away from other things and just focusing on something for a few hours and just sort of be creative for a bit.
Yeah.
And I just, just really, really love it.
So the one thing I just picked up there was that you sort of said at the very beginning you weren't kind of mad keen on writing music. Was it just discipline that got you, to the point where you got addicted to writing?
I think I found it really difficult to begin with because I didn't really know what I was doing, and it felt like even trying to do a mix down to a release quality standard was never achievable for me. I didn't think I could ever do it, but I persisted. And it's like, imagine you've got these massive brick walls and you suddenly break one down, you find out how to do something, and you hit another one and you just keep hitting these walls and it just feels like you're getting nowhere. But honestly, if you just keep doing it and giving it a go, things do start to happen. And then it gets to the point where you actually don't have to worry about, oh my God, I've got this idea in my head. How am I going to get it into my music? Because you know how to do it. Yeah. And then it becomes really fun because you can have ideas and you know how to actually create them.
Wicked. It's really interesting, actually, the kind of journey and your description of it. So which part of the process of writing a track at the moment do you enjoy the most?
Oh, that's a difficult one.
got ya.
It depends on like, I mean, some tracks, they just go together really quickly and the whole process is really enjoyable. And then sometimes you might get a really good idea, but then trying to make the arrangement interesting is really difficult. Or getting the mix down right is difficult, and you need to give it a few attempts to kind of get it to where you need it to be. So it's it's releasable. It just really varies. I think when you get that initial idea down though, and you're really into it, like that sort of excitement is really amazing. I really love that feeling.
Right. And is there a part that you really don't like doing, conversely, like find the mix down a chore or something like that?
I quite like doing the mixes. Quite like that. I think arrangements, like you kind of, you sort of, you do a load and then you start to think, well, how can I do something different again, but still keep it in a format that's, because it's techno, it's for DJs really. So
yeah,
it needs to be playable, not so experimental that nobody can play it. But how do you kind of keep changing it so not everyone's not the same,
Yeah.
That can be quite challenging sometimes, I think.
But it's still, for you, the whole thing is still enjoyable. There's not a bit that you kind of dread doing.
Yeah, I can't really put a single thing on it, really. But I think the only thing that I do dread is sort of having that feeling of not being able to come up with something that I like. And you're going through a bit of a dry patch, like everything you make, you either don't like or it just sounds like other people's stuff. And, that what's the point in releasing stuff that sounds like other people? So
yeah. How do you deal with that? When you go through one of those patches, have you got a kind of not necessarily a system, is perhaps a bit of an organised word for it, but are there things that you do, routines or anything to try and push you through that kind of block?
So sometimes I'll just try and power through it, and sometimes that works. Sometimes I'll just chuck on some mixes, and just listen to other mixes or go out to clubs. Like so many times I've not been feeling particularly inspired, and I'll just pop down to Fabric for a night and see somebody that just blows you away, and you're just like, wow.
Not anymore.
Well, unfortunately, but going out and seeing somebody play really well is inspiring sometimes, and sometimes just stepping away from it for a week and just not doing it, and then coming back with some fresh ideas, that helps. So
it's various different things. It's power through it, listen to some different music, some different mixes and stuff, potentially just get out and hear a DJ, and if all of those things aren't working, just step back and give it a bit of time, a bit of a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, it's probably not very helpful that, because I've listed everything, but it just depends.
It's fine. It's a list, isn't it? You can just tick each one. Right, I tried that. It didn't fucking work. I'll do something else. Brilliant. So to summarise, really, with the whole kind of journey with this, was really that you relentlessly just kept making music. You finished absolutely everything you started. That was your rule. So that's basically the quantity that you were getting done. Then you kept going through those brick walls, and that's where the quality came from. Then you enjoyed it, and of course that's then created the circle of now you really want to get in the studio. It's not even a discipline thing anymore, and that cycle has just seen you get into a, as you said, kind of obsessed, addicted kind of mindset when it comes to your music.
Yeah, for sure.
Brilliant. So what about looking at the other side of it? Are there any kind of pain points and any worries you have about your music? Do you kind of have things like, for example, now that a lot of people are familiar with your music, lots of people are playing it, you've had it played on like Radio 1 and lots of getting hammered by big DJs. Does that ever creep into your mind? I wonder what other people will think of this, or any kind of external worries like that?
Not really. It's just it's flattering that people want to play my music. It's more of a positive thing than anything. I don't really worry about it, to be honest with you. I mean, I write so much music. It's only a very small percentage that actually sees the light of day. So even if other DJs are playing the stuff that's released, I've got the option when I do my own gigs to play quite a lot of unreleased stuff of my own as well. To try and keep it a little bit different and fresh. So, and it also is a good way of testing things out. But it's not something I tend to worry about too much, to be honest with you.
So you just kind of power through now. You don't really have any kind of external anything that ever creep, any kind of creative demons or anything like that rear their head at any point when you're writing.
I mean, everybody goes through bad patches, and it's difficult to kind of say why they come about and why they go away. It's just natural, really. I think if you accept that they do happen and actually not worry too much that they will go away eventually. It might take a bit longer sometimes, but as long as you don't worry about it too much, it's kind of okay.
Right, and I just wanted to quickly ask you, you've obviously written all these tracks. How do you decide which ones you're going to either send to labels or, obviously you've got your own label that you release on, but let's say send to labels, because some of the people I've spoken to, they'll have like the manager of the label will listen to their tunes and say this one. Some people are like a duo, so one person tended to write the music, the other person did more DJing, and he would say, yeah, I think that one's definitely good. How do you determine which ones out of all of these tracks you're writing are the ones that you want to send out?
Well, to be honest with you, the labels that I work with, it's more like they're friends, and it's rare that I sort of contact labels sort of unsolicited, because they tend to know me or I know them. But I think there's a few things really, like when I get a chance to play out and I'll test the track out, and if it really works and people respond to it, then you kind of know that you're onto something a bit. So that helps. You sort of have to think about the sound of the label that you're approaching a bit, and think about what you're sending them. That is important. Yeah, I'm not sure what else really is. It's kind of just bouncing stuff off friends for feedback sometimes, and then sometimes it's just going with your gut feeling and hoping it works. I mean, for my label, I put stuff out with not really playing it to people and just hope that it kind of does okay,
right,
on your gut feeling, and it's kind of worked. Others have been like I did the tracks with Jamie, and I was playing them out quite a long time before they actually finally got released, but I knew that they were working, and the other people that I played them to, said they worked. So it varies really, but I think you've got to kind of have a gut feeling about stuff.
So you have a gut feeling, and then you combine that with a kind of group of people that you know and trust, and they know what they're talking about, and you can ask their opinions and feedback as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So I've got a question actually that's kind of just around this area of the mindset and your history stuff that Johan asked in the Facebook group. It's quite an interesting one actually. It's a little bit left field, but he said, what production advice would you give to yourself as a producer 10 years ago? So if you could travel back in time to when you were, well, it would be pretty much just starting, wouldn't it, for you in the realms of techno? What would you say to yourself?
Well, I think the main thing was, just prior to doing techno, I was doing drum and bass, and I got into a habit of installing millions of different plugins and software synths and trying to have the latest new thing because it was cool or somebody said it was really good. And actually that was one of the worst things that for me I could have done, because you just get lost in having a play with all these different toys and not actually mastering any of them.
Yeah.
So when I came back to do techno, I completely overhauled my studio setup, built a new computer, and only installed the few things that I really liked from working previously. So I had one EQ, which I used, and I still use that same EQ, one really good compressor and maybe a good limiter, and a few reverb plugins and a couple of software synths, and then just really learnt them inside out. And then you master them, and you really know how to use them. Whereas before, you just get lost in not actually learning anything. So I think just stripping everything down and only using a few really good quality tools would be the main thing.
And do you get tempted anymore when people go, oh, Rob, check out the compressor 2 million? Do you think, oh, I will have a look, or you're just like, no, I'm not letting anything encroach on what I know works?
It really doesn't bother me. Like I find it quite hard to get excited about this stuff, to be honest with you. Like I've got the stuff that I use, and I know that it works. And occasionally, like I'll dabble with something, but it's not like I'm researching the new thing all the time, you know. And you know, the sound that I get, you know, it probably is a little bit different to other people, and I quite like that. It's kind of doing your own thing and just mastering it. So yeah, I don't really get excited about this stuff, to be honest.
Do you use any hardware at all?
Yeah, I bought a few bits actually, and again, I didn't want to buy stuff that everyone else had, and I was, you know, heavily and I still am heavily inspired by Detroit techno, and I wanted to find out some of the machines that some of those early Detroit techno records used, right, to make, but not the obvious ones, which go for silly money now second hand. So I bought a Yamaha DX100, and I got that for a couple of £100, and it sounds fantastic. Right, get amazing string sounds with that, and it's like pure Detroit. And then I bought a Roland JV 2080 sound module, and it's really versatile and it sounds fantastic, and it was used a lot in the 90s, I think, and quite a lot of dance music records, but you can use it for so many different things. Like the pad sounds are amazing, some really cool stabby sounds and stuff, so I used that quite a bit. The one thing I did buy recently, or last Christmas, was the Boutique JU06 by Roland. That's right. Really cool. I mean, everybody's got that, but I do really like it. And that's about it, really. I don't have masses of hardware, but just a few bits that work really well. And you use Logic, is that right still? No, Cubase. Cubase, right. Yeah. So you've stuck with Cubase right from the start? Yeah. I've tried to, I mean, I've dabbled with Ableton, but it's so alien to what I'm used to. I find it difficult to kind of get my ideas out. And if I sat down for a couple of weeks learning it, I'm sure I would master it. And I've written stuff with Chris Page, who is a friend of yours, and we've always kind of used Ableton when I've gone over to his place, and I've picked up bits from him. But I just like Cubase. I like the sound of it, and I like the workflow in it. Yeah, so basically you've learned a select bunch of tools, and very occasionally something new gets brought in to try, and if you like it, you'll go with it. But as a rule, you're more interested in writing the music than playing with the toys. Exactly. I mean, a few weeks ago, I built a new PC for the studio, and that was the first computer I built since 2008. So the last computer. That's some, did you have to wind the other one up to get it started? The only reason that it eventually failed was because the motherboard blew up on it, and it was still running Windows XP. Right. To be fair, that is the best one they ever made, I think. So. Oh yeah, and a friend gave me that computer, so it was old when I had it. It was probably 15 years old, that computer. So. And I really didn't want to upgrade the computer, but I'm kind of glad that I did now. It was so easy to build this new PC, and I've got Windows 10 on it, and although Cubase 5, which is the one I use, is not officially supported, it kind of works. So, I might upgrade to the new Cubase eventually, but I quite like the old version. That's quality. It's absolutely brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant listening to you saying things like this. Probably like the audiophile's nightmare, but it's just what I use. I'm not bothered about the latest thing, really. Oh, it's great. No, so many people have got the gear sluts thing. It's really the magpie, the shiny objects. Oh, what's this? What does this do? Oh, I'll have this thing, and so on. And
I suffered with that really badly, and I still like new gadgets and toys here and there. But back in the day, as you were describing, I just picked up an insurmountable pile of stuff and never really got to grips with any of it. So everything that you're saying makes sense. So when you sit down to write a track, do you have a specific workflow and approach? You know, you're getting the drums done first, or if you're going to write some kind of lead sound or the stabs or whatever it might be, is there an order you normally approach your tracks from?
I think I've thought about this more in the last couple of years. I think I try and be more disciplined now. So I sort of break it down into stages. So I have the first thing I do is get an 8-bar loop going or something like that, and just get the initial idea down. So just throw a few drums in, play around with some sounds, and try and come up with the main body of the idea. Once I'm really happy with that, I mean, that might take me an evening or a couple of evenings, doing a few hours. Then I'll purposely leave it until the next session, and then I come back to it with fresh ears and I listen to the loop again. Is it working? Okay. If it's not, then I'll change stuff until I think it's ready. Or if I think it's fine, then I'll start doing the arrangement. I'll set out all of the arrangement. Once I'm happy with that, I will then do the automation, record all the automation in, and at the very end, I'll try and do the bulk of the mix down.
Right. Because
I found that, as I said earlier, like I was trying to mix stuff on the fly, and then I get to the end and I sort of overcook the track a bit.
Yeah.
And this I find works really well for me, sort of just trying to break it down into those three main parts. So your initial loop idea, then the arrangement, and then the mix down.
So in the arrangement, are you sort of, is that where you add things like, okay, I'm bringing the energy up, so I'll get some ride cymbals in and some of the support sounds to the main idea that you come up with in the loop?
Well, I'll get everything ready at the loop stage, and I'm just muting things, so I can just say, what are the drums, mute everything else and have the drums going, and then I'll have all the parts ready, apart from my little effects sounds that I'll put in later on.
Right.
But it's, rides, everything that I need, and then I'll arrange it using all those sounds, and then just pepper on bits of effects, noises and stuff at the end, and then I'll do the mix at the very end.
Right. And do you have sort of a go-to set of samples or presets or things that you turn to quite regularly to start your tracks?
Well, I found that with Cubase, when you load it up, it just loads up empty. So what I did was made a template so that when I load it up, I've got all the audio channels set up how I need them. So I'll have an EQ, and then I use something called a Sonorous Satson.
Yes, yeah, I shout about that to the community a lot. It's a great bit of kit.
I love it. So each audio channel has the Gliss EQ, and then the Sonorous Satson, and then I've got a load of other insert points, free if I need to add on other bits. And then as soon as I've got, I can bring in my audio sounds then, and then I don't have to then go and find all these plugins because they're already there. And I'll have all the MIDI channels set up. I'll have a few soft synths ready to go, and I've got all my groups and everything set up so that I'm not wasting time building the template up.
Yeah,
I can just dive straight into it. So that helps speed things up. And then I've just got, a few go-to things at hand. Like, if I need to compress something, I'll have my compressor ready. And I tend to only use, because I use the Satson, you don't really need to go mad with compressors as well.
Yeah.
I might use a PSP vintage warmer very sparingly if I need to compress further. But
that thing's a beast. You've got to use it sparingly.
Yeah, no. But other than that, I don't really do a lot else,
And what about the sounds themselves? For example, samples. Do you have a pool of samples that you've built that you know they're going to fit for your sound, put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent years sort of developing my sample libraries and trying to organise them. And somebody who I met during my drum and bass times, he gave me the most incredible sample library of all of his stuff that he'd built up, and I've done and that was very well organised. And then I sort of added to that myself, and it's just kind of an ongoing development. But also with my hardware, every track that I make, I'll record stuff in from the hardware and then keep that in my sample library so I can go back and resample stuff and, you know, chop it up, replay it in a different order and fuck it up and stuff. So I've got all those bits to hand as well.
Yeah. So I've got quite a few kind of techie questions that the guys wanted to ask you. I did kind of warn you beforehand that there'd be a few. So the first one is about the low end treatment, because you've got a really banging low end that you get in your tracks. You know, are there any tips that you can share about how you create that, like processing, for example, or anything along those lines?
With the kick drums, I tend to sort of split them up into component parts. So I might have a punchy kick for like the punchy part of it, and then use something separately for the sub, and then maybe something for the very top as well, like a bit of distorted kick or whatever. And then it's just a process of lining them up so that they don't conflict with each other, and then running them through a group. And I don't really compress them. I just use the Satson sparingly. But it's all about samples, really, to be honest with you. It's got to be the right sample to begin with. Right,
so you've got to put in the right ingredients to get the sound that you want.
Really, really important. Because if you use a shit sample, it's just never going to cut through properly.
Right. And when you're saying about the way that you're layering them, you're not doing this via splitting them into frequency parts. You're actually doing it by kind of audio editing. So you chop off the first bit of the kick and chop off the tail of another kick. Is that right?
It's a mixture of both. So
right.
I don't really use a sampler as such. It's really archaic and like a dinosaur doing it. But what I'll do is say if I've got a kick drum and I've got one part which is the punchy part, and then another one which is got a really good subby oomph to it towards the end, I'll import those two onto separate audio channels and then zoom right in. And then the one which is punchy, I'll split. So you've got that initial punch, and then the tail, I'll then put that onto a third channel and keep that in a position where it's still... So where the initial punch stops, the chopped second half goes on a separate channel, and I'll high pass that. So you've still got like the top sound of it.
Right.
It still sounds natural. And then the subby bit, I'll line it up physically with the audio. If that's got a punchy start to it, I might sort of clip that out and then get that to work with the punch. So you get the punch, and then immediately after the sub, and I'll line them up accordingly and then EQ them accordingly as well, so they try not to conflict with each other.
Right.
And then it's just, processing it from there, really.
Right, so it is quite techie, the design of that. And how does the bass then work around the kick? Have you got any kind of processing tips or just any mix down tips for that?
People do all this like side chain compression and all that. I don't have an idea how to do that. So I honestly don't know how. So, and it's just a faff to do that. So for me, it's about working with the audio in a loop and just making sure that stuff is not conflicting with each other. So I'll look at, if I've got a bass line or a tom sound, I'll make sure that hit is not sounding when the kick is, for example, because if I know that they both hit on the same beat, they're probably going to start conflicting with each other.
Yeah.
And then you're going to lose the punch and all the nice sub and stuff. So it's just making sure that the elements are positioned so that you don't conflict. And to be honest with you, I don't really write bass lines as such. I tend to work a lot with either toms or maybe other kick sounds which have been processed or EQ'd, or the audio just kind of mangled up. So it's like other kick drums that's to make up what sounds like a bass line, but it's actually not.
Right, so when you're saying mangled up, are these kind of things like distortion and saturation and all of those things that you're sticking on them?
It can be, but it's also like physically clipping, or not clipping's not the right word, but cutting the sounds in audio and using the fade in and the fade out and stuff just to kind of make it sit with the other elements.
Right.
Sometimes I'll do like a synth line that might have quite a good low end component. And it's just really trying to make sure that, again, the hits, say if it's like a stabby sound, are not, sounding on the kick drum, for example, because it might start conflicting again.
Okay, cool.
So it's just trying to separate the sounds out, really, and position them physically so they don't all sound on the same beats and stuff.
And do you add any sort of movement over time? So you were talking about automation earlier, but anything like that to the drums? Because as I've mentioned before, you always get a wicked groove in your tracks. Is that what really just kind of underpins it, or is there extra movement? Are you kind of tweaking the drums throughout the track?
There's not a huge amount of automation to the drums, to be honest. I mean, I might fade in hats and stuff and fade them out, but I tend to kind of work in blocks of 8 bars. So when I do my arrangement, if I've got all my sounds, I'll copy every audio channel, for example, across to 6.5 minutes or however long I want the track to be. And then it's just a case of using the rubber and scrubbing out everything. So it's like you start with the full palette and then you chisel away at it.
Right.
You take out what you don't want at certain points. So I know for the last minute or so, I probably won't want any hats. So I'll have copied everything across to begin with, and then it's just deleting all those hat parts out for the last minute. I don't tend to automate the drums so much, but to kind of get the groove, I found in Cubase, I'll have like the drums on the beat, for example, like the kick drum. But then I'll zoom in, and if I've got a hi-hat, I might turn off, I'll position it on a 16th, for example, and then I'll turn the quantize off, and then I'll physically move it ever so slightly, probably later than the beat.
Right.
And I'll do that with all the percussive sounds as well, and I'll move stuff around. So it's still generally within the beat, but it's slightly off. And that's what gives it the groove, I find. So
you're literally just, you're making all of these sort of micro adjustments, and you're just listening out until that sounds clicked in the groove onto the next one, and just keep moving them until you get the feeling that you've got it right.
Yeah, because you might put a hat sound in, but it's so tight and on the beat that it feels like it's hurrying the track along.
Right.
And it doesn't feel natural to me, so I might want to move it back a bit to give it a bit more breathing space, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And it's just, getting stuff roughly on the beat and then turning the quantize off and just playing around a little bit.
And I've got the next question is perhaps a little bit controversial, but I totally get. This is from Matt, and he's a massive techno head, but he was saying, how important do you think the mixdown is in techno? Because, and he went to great lengths to say not your music because he'd listened to yours and really liked it, but he said he gets the impression that he listens to a lot of techno these days and they haven't even bothered with a mixdown. It's just kind of a wall of blur like coming at you. What are your thoughts on that, just in general in techno?
Well, there's a few different sort of sonic approaches to it, really. It's funny because in the 90s, when everything was really fast and loopy, it was all about like making it aggressive sounding and most stuff was made with hardware, so it kind of had this raw sound to it, which was really cool. But then when minimal came along, everyone started making music in the computer, and it never had that kind of organic sound to it. Everything was so clean and crisp. I don't really like that sound, to be honest. It's too clinical for me. And I think that when everything's done in the computer, it sounds so clean. It's like it's made within this vacuum. And what makes techno for me sound more or just better is when things have got a bit of hiss and a bit of slight distortion and stuff. It just sounds more organic. And that also, but also some people have kind of taken that and gone to extremes with it. And also, I'm not really a fan of that because it doesn't sound balanced or done well to me. So I think getting the balance of a really good mix, but still having a bit of distortion, a little bit of hiss and crackle and stuff to give it that natural sound is really important. So yeah, I try and sort of balance that really.
Yeah, it is an interesting one because I've had discussions about this before because we were talking about this as well with techno becoming really popular, and whenever that's the case, we get, a huge ton of people start trying to dive into it. And I think it is a genre that sounds one of the easier ones to start creating because you don't necessarily have to have, any ability with melodies and so on and so forth. But I think that people come in and think, well, it's quite just deep, dark and banging. I don't need to do much on the mix down. And I do get the feeling that from a mix down point of view, a lot of people who are just sort of coming in and shitting stuff out are really letting the side down on that front. And just, I think it's like a lack of giving a shit sometimes, unfortunately. Of course, you don't get it with the top producers, but it seems that people are just jumping on the bandwagon and just thinking, well, to hell with it, murmury, lack of clarity sounds good kind of thing.
Yeah, for me, the mix is quite important, so I do try and put quite a bit of effort into it. But, coming from drum and bass, the mix, the levels of the technical levels that go into doing mix downs for drum and bass is like off the scale. But it's almost like it's gone too far, it's like it's too technical and it's too perfect. So, I take influence from drum and bass, like it has to have a good mix, but not going so far that it kind of kills the creativity, really.
And kind of linked to this a little bit, but just really moving on to studio environment more. Somebody else asked, as Clement actually asked, how important do you think acoustics are in your studio for writing this kind of techno?
Well, having studied acoustics and do it every day for a job is pretty important.
Yeah, you are kind of the optimal person to be asking, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, you can have the best monitors in the world, but if you put them in a room which sounds horrendous and is way too reverberant, it's just, what's the point? You won't be able to tell the difference between the good monitors and a 50 quid pair of monitors. So it's really important to get the room right. My room could be a lot better, to be honest, but we talked earlier about the fact that I'm planning to build a studio at my house eventually, and then I will do proper treatments and stuff. But I've got a half decent set of Mackie monitors. They're the HR824s.
Okay, yeah.
They're the original Mark 1 versions, and I've had them for donkey's years. And I really love them. Got no real desire to change. And my friend Jamie Anderson, he uses the same ones. So it was quite nice when I went over to his place because it was just same monitors. So just knowing your monitors really well and having a good room is really important, I think.
Yeah. And we talked earlier about you saying you'd get home from work and kind of write for a couple of hours. And then we're also talking about your current situation. It's pretty much the same now, isn't it? You still kind of are writing a few hours in the evening.
Yeah. Yeah, it's difficult when you've got kids because they're so unpredictable. Things change. So I don't sort of say, well, this is how it is, because next week might be different. But I went through a period of actually when our first son was just born, his sleeping pattern was sort of all over the place. So I swapped my pattern round and would go to bed really early in the evening. So we'd sort of come home, have a bit of dinner, come home from work, have a bit of dinner, and then, you know, off to bed really early. And then I would get up super early, get up at like 5, and then do a couple of hours before work. And if he woke up, I would sit and feed him in the studio with me.
with the techno on.
Yeah. And he'd just sit there, had this harness thing, and he would sit with me in the studio, and he'd drift off to sleep, and I'd be sitting there making techno.
Quality.
But yeah, that worked for a while, actually, and it was it was difficult to get up, but once you were up, you felt so fresh, like, in the studio, like, it was really good for creativity, actually, because doing it at the end of the day, when you've been at work all day and you're actually quite tired, sometimes you're not the most productive. You sort of find other things to distract you. So I go, oh, well, I might just go on Facebook, and then that goes on for like half an hour, and then you sit there and you've like not actually done anything.
Yeah.
Whereas actually doing it in the morning, you're super focused on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a 5 o'clock guy. I'm up at 5 every morning. The early morning's my kind of little haven.
Yeah, it's great if you can do it, but now, you know, our routine is come home, get the boys ready for bed, and then it's like that's your free time then, and they're up early in the morning, and you've got to be sorting them out. So the only sort of free time I get is the evening now, so I'm back on evenings.
Right. So I'm pretty much spent now with the questions from the guys and that I had, but I always like to kind of finish up with if you can think of a kind of a top tip that you would give to people who are just starting out, or who are perhaps in the stage where they're struggling to get their tracks finished, or even as you were, you know, not finding the process that enjoyable. They really want to do it. They love the music. Maybe they want to do it to become DJs, or they really want to realize the ideas that they've got in their head, but it's kind of in the grind, let's call it, at this stage. Do you have any top tips, any advice that you could share?
I think I've probably covered everything, but to summarise, I would say get a really good set of monitors. Spend a bit of money on those, because that's important. Also, make sure that your room is half decent acoustics-wise. Maybe get a few absorber panels, and, you know, just spend a bit of time getting that right. And then find a sequencer that works well for you. If you want to go the computer route, some people are just doing everything with hardware, and, you know, that's great if you can do that. If you go in the computer route, find something that works for you. So for me, it's Cubase, but a lot of people use other things. And then don't go too crazy with finding the latest plugins. Just get a few things that are really good and work, and just really master them, and then just do it. You've got to just put the hours in and get through that initial period of perhaps not enjoying it so much, because eventually it will get better. And once you get somewhere, it's really good fun. And, you know, once you get to the point where you can make tracks and then you can release them, or people start playing them out, and you go and you actually see them being played in a club, and then them working and people responding to it, is honestly, that feeling is incredible. So it's just, you know, putting the time into it, really.
And how do you? I've got one last question, actually. That was awesome, by the way. Thanks for the kind of summary there. I do have one more question, because you obviously now you're playing in some wicked clubs, and you would have heard a lot of DJs playing your tracks. When I was talking to FaZe about this, he was saying that he always felt his tracks sounded very different to other people's, just because he'd made them. It was like a weird psychological thing. Do you get anything like that when you're hearing your music played out in a set with other, you know, your tracks with other people's in a set?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's some places where, I mean, my stuff, it can be quite banging, but generally it's not like super high energy type stuff. My stuff tends to be a bit deeper. So if I'm playing somewhere and I'm conscious that I should probably try and play some of my own stuff, but it's like the sort of place where you just kind of have to come on and bang it, you know. It's like, how am I going to do it? You tend to find a way, you know, usually, but there is always this sort of anxiety about playing your stuff. But then, you know, you might play something and then it works, and it's like, it's the most fun because you've got more of that kind of stuff to play, you know, and people respond to it. So, yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a weird one, that, but
and it's more of a connection for you as well, because not only are you playing music to people, you're playing the music that you made. So it's you know, it's really organic. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, with the DJing thing, I remember watching an interview with Craig Richards years ago, and him saying that he doesn't play for the crowd. Like, he just does his thing, and then if the crowd go with him, then that's a bonus. I remember thinking, oh, God, that's awful. Like, he should be playing for the crowd. He should be like entertaining them. But now it's like I completely get where he's coming from, and you know, to be like a true artist, I think, you know, to have that creative freedom to kind of do your thing, and then get the crowd to come with you is like completely amazing.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, actually. I'd never really thought about that before, because as soon as you just sort of said that quote, I thought, does that work? Haven't you got to kind of, because I mean, obviously I used to DJ a lot, and whilst I would never want to compromise the sound that I wanted to play, and you know, I have been in places where, you know, it's been a bad booking and it's bummed, you know, because the music that I was playing, the kind of progressive house, tech house stuff, it was just like some kind of funky house do, and well, that's it. I didn't have that shit. I can't, you know, I didn't have that. I couldn't play it. But on the same token, if I was playing and I noticed, okay, you know, the more kind of euphoric-y stuff seems to be going off in here, I would tailor what I was playing, as opposed to just actually, I'm in a bit of a dark mood, I'm just going to hammer out something really moody tonight. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I suppose it's certainly when you get to the level where, I mean, obviously you're playing in clubs where everybody is there to hear that style of music, so you probably got that much more freedom to just play what you want, because people are really there to hear what you want anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you can't do it everywhere, but you know, when you do get that creative freedom and you are sort of doing your thing, and then there normally comes a point, like, if it works, like, you get to a point in the set where you know that you've got them, and then that's when the fun starts, because you know you can do whatever you want then, and they're just going to go with it, and they're kind of like, right, we trust you now.
Yeah,
do your thing, you know, and that's just like so much fun.
Let's end on one last question. Gun against your head, what's your favourite club to play in? That is,
it varies. Like,
that's a good answer. You got out of jail straight away there. It varies.
It genuinely does, because I don't really have a favourite. I mean, Room 2 at Fabric was always amazing to play at. Trezor I've always loved. When I played at Berghain, that was really special. Like, I've done that 3 times now. Every time's been amazing. But I have to say, this year I've played at Trezor 3 times, and every time has been completely amazing. It really feels like there's something happening there now. And I've done 2 closing sets with open ends. So you come on at like 10 in the morning, no, about 6 in the morning, and then you just keep playing, and there's no defined end time. And I've done like 6-hour closing sets there that just go on for hours, you know, and it's just unbelievable. So I have to say, like, Trezor has been really amazing this year.
And what's the best night to go there? What night of the week?
Fridays and Saturdays I've played, and they're both great, really. It doesn't really matter.
Right, because I'm out in Berlin in a couple of weeks, so I'm actually doing a conference thing there for Ableton, so I really shouldn't be going out to all night parties, but when in Berlin and all that. Wicked stuff. Well, look, it's been really super cool talking to you. You've shared so much. It's kind of off the chart, really, and some of the stuff, you know, particularly what you were talking about in the earlier days, and the going through the grind and the dedication and the discipline, and how that's turned into an obsession. I think stuff like that's been gold. And then, of course, answering all these technical questions have been really enlightening as well. And like your setup and the way that you approach it, and not being the magpie, you know, kind of looking at all the new gear, has been fantastic. So it's, you know, a ginormous thank you from me, and one from everyone in the community as well. They were really excited to hear what you had to say, and you've said loads. So I thank you very much, sir, for your time today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be able to come on and share some knowledge.
That's been absolutely awesome. So cheers, Rob, and I'm sure we'll get you on again, buddy.
Thanks, Keith.
Nice one. So, told you that one was kick-ass. Rob shared some real quality in that one, went in depth in a lot of different areas. And I'd love to hear what you guys think about the experiences. Does it marry up with what you're going through? Do you connect with it? Did you find any of this particularly inspirational, or get any breakthroughs, light bulb moments, anything like that? Dive over to the Facebook page. Let's get a discussion started around this one. And I will see you next month for another pro interview. Take care. Pro interview. Take care. Pro interview. Take care. Pro interview.